Hello and welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri. Welcome. If it's your first time here, Mondays and Fridays we hang out, we do a live show, we talk about what's in the news, whatever's on our mind. And if you are a regular viewer, you know I've been practicing doing these by myself to get more comfortable with it. But today I have a guest. I'm going back to the old format. I'm very honored to have Dr. Linda Blade here with us. I don't know if I should call her Dr. Blade or Coach Blade. I
Just
think
call me Coach Blade.
Coach Blade here. Let's just bring her on. Welcome. I
Coach
was about.
Blade. Hi, everybody.
Oh yeah, there it is in your title, Coach Blade.
Yeah.
So you are. It's been a couple years since I spoke with you. I
Yep.
was about to read your bio, but it's probably better coming from you. Can you just tell anybody
Sure.
who's not familiar with you a little about yourself?
Well, thank you for having me, Keri. It's always an honor to be with you. This is probably the third time I've actually spoken with you. It was like every 2 years or something we have to do this, right? And
Yes.
so I live in Canada, in Edmonton, Alberta, and I was an NCAA All American from the University of Maryland. So I enjoyed and participated in all the benefits of Title IX as an athlete. Then I became a Canadian champion, and then I got married, and spent some time in Africa with my husband, who's an agronomist. Eventually, I got my PhD and in sports sciences as in growth and development and puberty and all that in children and how that affects their performance. And then when I moved back home, back to where we are now from Africa, there were no professorships. I thought I'd be a prof. And so I got kind of pulled into high performance coaching as a sort of independent contractor, sort of private business. And I've coached athletes in 17 different sports because track and field is foundational. So like if you're a hockey player and you want to run faster or skate faster, you get off the ice and run faster. That's how you make your body move faster. And then if you're a figure skater and you want to jump higher, you come off the ice and do what track and field jumpers do. So I was able to do a lot of specialty training and coaching. And then
For all
by
different kinds of
2000,
sports.
for
That's
many different sports. So like, think about it. Even if you're a swimmer, if you want to gain time, you get power to push off the wall. That's a jump, right? So we can do things, that
yeah.
to help an athlete get better at their sport, even though if I don't know the sport. In fact, I grew up in South America and spent time in my youth in the Amazon rainforest. And if you would have told me then that I was helping winter sports and like I would eventually coach 2 figure skaters to Olympic gold medal, it was like, no, I don't know anything about ice or sports, winter sports. So anyway, and I didn't get to participate in them as a child, obviously, if I'm in the middle of the jungle. But so then basically, by 2014, I became president of Track and Field Athletics Alberta in my state or my province here. And that was in that role as president that I got to go to national meetings. And by 2018, I became aware of a national endeavor to have self-identity in sport and allowing men to self-identify as women and in women's sport. And so I became suddenly like, the alarm bells went off.
Wait, what year was that? You said 2000.
That was 2018. So it was 4 years into my presidency. And every 2 years I had to be re-elected as president of this track and field association, which is like about 3,500 members. It's the main, it's one of the main sports in Alberta. And so it was at that year when I became aware of this crazy ideology, and right away, and I went to the table of all the other presidents across Canada, and we were sitting in meetings, national meetings, and I'm saying, like, this isn't going to work because we know from the world records, national records, even local records, boys outperform girls. So it's never going to be fair, and it. And they all looked down at their hands. So I know I was in big trouble because I thought, here we have something where I'm telling them the truth, and nobody wants to acknowledge that. Yeah, this is the truth. They're trying to push something else.
It's like it used to be common sense.
Yeah.
Now.
And so basically now, so that's what got me started on the journey when nobody inside the meeting rooms nationally and the sports groups would kind of acknowledge and engage with me on this. I went to Twitter and started tweeting things. And
No.
right away, I just realized people were starting to respond and say, oh, Coach Blade has something to say about this. And I didn't realize I was the only coach at the time actually saying anything about it. And then, of course, fast forward to Barbara Kay and I writing our book together, Canadian journalist Barbara Kay. I was so honored that she asked me to write a book with her on the topic. And now this year, just this month, I finished being president. I've moved on. I was like 9 years president. It was time, because most presidents don't probably serve more than about 6 or 7 years. And I was going to stop being president even before COVID. And then COVID happened. It was so confusing for everybody. And I just thought, no, I'm going to stay on and help guide the association through the COVID madness. And so then we got to the point now where I feel like I'm ready for bigger things. So I thought, whatever I do on a bigger stage, it's going to come back to haunt the poor small staff in the sports association. And I feel like, it was really time to say, look, we have it all settled in that sport. It's the one sport association that has sex-based guidelines for eligibility. And so we kind of established ourselves in that, and I felt like it was pretty safe to move on.
Can you talk about that a little bit more? What are the sex-based? But before you do, you mentioned your book, and I just want to put it up here so anybody who's curious, it's Unsporting. This is the book that you wrote with Barbara Kay.
Barbara Kay.
How trans activism and science denial are destroying sport.
Yeah. And that was in 2021 that we published that. It's on Amazon, so you can find it. And truthfully, we even in that title, how trans activism and science denial are destroying sport. Even in that title, we sort of flip-flop between destroying women's sport or just destroying sport. And the reason we didn't put the words women in there is, as what we're seeing now in some sports, where the disruption that this causes isn't just on the women's side. Like if an official is sort of misgendering somebody on the ground, and that's, now a new rule even for grassroots sports or something, we have so many volunteers that we're not going to get the people helping in the sport if it becomes too uncomfortable. So it's going to be affecting boys and girls.
Yes.
And yeah, so it eventually starts with women's sports, but it sort of seeps out into all these other things that affect sport. So that's why we did that, because it does affect little boys too eventually. Yeah.
And it affects overall
society,
sportsmanship, the idea of like, what does sportsmanship mean?
Yeah, fair play and all that.
Yeah.
And so, as far as in my book, we recommended a very simple solution that works pretty well and is 100% inclusive, is that because of the advantages that male athletes have, if you're going to have a binary system, then the simplest thing is to have female category that is female only, and then make the male category open so that anybody of any identity can compete over there and not be disadvantaging women. So in other words, if you are, let's say, a male-born athlete and you're trying to identify as a woman, you still should compete with the males. And if you're a female-born athlete, but you're taking testosterone, you should also compete on the male side because you're calling yourself a man, and you're also having extra supplementation that will give you a competitive advantage. So our solution was pretty straightforward, and this was what we have in our policy, essentially, is if you're born male, compete male. If you're female, you compete female unless you're taking testosterone, then you should go to the other side. And so basically there's female and then female plus, anything extra from female, right? Which is the open category. Does that make sense?
That does. And I read, I'm sure that we talked about briefly before we started, there's a lot that's happened in the past few years. I haven't followed all of it, but I did just see in British cycling, they adopted these guidelines where they're going to have the female only and then the open category.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we were saying right from the beginning. In fact, it became instantly obvious to me the very first time I ever heard of this and read this insane policy proposal. I just said, no, it's very simple. It's female, and then nobody should have a competitive advantage. So if you're a male, somebody coming into the male category does not bring with them a competitive advantage. They can be in there and they can participate, which is perfectly fine. But if you're allowing people with an advantage to come into the women's side, that's just not sporting. That's just not fair. So it was a pretty simple solution. I'm really happy that a lot of now that the trend in at least in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, the trend is going more and more towards female and open, which completely makes sense to me. And can I just say something? In this whole trans debate of, males and women's sports or people self-identifying into different things, one of the things that you have pointed out early on to me, and I've really, really sort of kept it in my mind and in my descriptions of the situation, was the fact that there's female-born people who also identify as trans and non-binary. In fact, in the younger set, we all know this in the high schools, a majority of the trans and non-binary are literally the female students who want to identify out of womanhood.
That's the case now.
Exactly now. So when we see the next generation of athletes, there are a lot of female athletes who are self-identifying as men or as non-binary. Okay. Now, those athletes actually they remain in the female category. Most of them, by far the majority of those types of trans and non-binary, the female born type, they're staying in the women's category, in the female girls category. So if you're going to allow a male born person to come into that female category, you're literally actually having discrimination on the basis of sex of one type of trans person against other types.
That's true. I hadn't thought of it that way, actually, but you are. Yes.
So when I described that, so I went to, I don't want to get too much into this yet because I want to tell you the story of what happened since the book, but I was in Texas in January this year, 2023, to go to an NCAA conference where Riley Gaines and some of the other women and Icons women, they were going to present the NCAA with, legal, just serve them some legal notice that they might be subject to lawsuits for having people like Leah Thomas compete against the women and girls and have that NCAA policy. It has to change to be fair to women and girls. And so I was in Texas. We had a booth at the convention floor as Icons Women, which is the new American women's group that came up after the Leah Thomas event. But what I was going to say is we had many, many visitors to our booth and talking about the women's sports issue and asking what this group was about. And one of the most stark moments in my mind from that weekend was the fact that there were some 20-something girls that came to there was a high school girl and 20-something girl. They were sisters. And they came to our booth and they were kind of trying to have a polite conversation. They didn't really agree with us about, they said we should be nice and let boys into women's sports and all that. And then we started talking. And this one girl, she and I got off to the side, was the older one. And I did say exactly what I just told you, that because you probably have a lot of peers who are identifying as non-binary, right? And she goes, yeah. And I said, well, they're staying in the women's sports, right? And she goes, yeah, pretty much. And I said, so tell me this, if we women in sport, we are already accepting and celebrating these types of trans people in our own sport. Like we accept the female born trans in our own division. We have no problem with them. We're completely inclusive of them. We don't bully them. If the women's side of it, we're dealing with our own trans, why can't the men deal with their own trans? And why is it that once again in 2023, it's always the women that have to solve the men's problem for them? Mm-hmm. And she her eyes went like this. You just blew my mind. So she literally turned her back to me and just thought for a moment. And then she looked at me and goes, you're absolutely right. I never thought about it. I thought this is just another round of women having to deal with men's problems. It's,
Yes.
So she goes, oh, now I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Because it's literally actually a kind of transphobia to force a male body into women's sports, because it's really discriminating against female-born trans.
Yes. And I love that question. I love that you asked that, because I'm always trying to figure out when I'm talking to people who are just, maybe they haven't thought about it a lot. They just are they're tribalists, and they're on what they view as a particular side. And maybe their identity's wrapped up in being like progressive or liberal, leftist, whatever they think of that as. And so they just automatically are like, you're transphobic if you don't want, trans women competing with women. Whenever I'm talking with those kind of people, I'm always trying to think of the questions like you just asked. Like, what's the thing that might force them out of their repeated phrases and just have them think about something? And that's probably a question she had not heard before.
No, and most people isn't it interesting that the female-born trans and non-binary are the invisible ones in this debate all the time?
Yes.
They're not the ones trying to push their way onto men's sports. They're with us. They're with us.
Yes.
They don't mind.
Can you, speaking of talking to people who are in that kind of tribe, the past 6 months or so, I've been trying to remind myself that I don't want to just talk to people who agree with me, and that there are a lot of people who end up watching my show. I know because I've heard from them, who start off hate watching me or thinking something about me like, oh, she's crazy right wing, and then they start watching, and some of them have come around on some things. So
interesting.
I want to ask you, it may feel like we're talking about this issue from a very common sense area, but for people who are in that cult, I was in it, so I can call it cult.
Ideology.
When they're in that echo chamber. That's a better word. When they're in that echo chamber. Can you just lay out? I still come across people in that world who will say things like, I'm going to throw out some of the things they've said to me, and I want to hear your answers. So they'll say to me, men don't have a biological advantage. I'm a faster runner than my brother, and I'm a woman.
Well, it's, first of all, patently untrue that there's no advantage. I mean, it's so well studied. And I mean, again, as I said to my colleagues early on, it's like you look at the world records, it's absolutely true that every single world record or record in sport, from grassroots up to worlds, if it's including like cardio, like physiological things, like endurance things or power or speed, the boys always outperform the girls, always. So what the person's doing when they say, well, I beat my brother in running, is almost meaningless, because there is some crossover. I mean, obviously, if you are a woman and let's say you're the 90th percentile of a runner, and you find a man who's like 5 percentile on the men's side, well, obviously you're probably going to be faster than that guy. And somebody just the other day I noticed posted like a cluster of huge range of human bodies. Like there's a study in all these different body types for different sports and showing only women in the range. Oh, there's such a range, so men can fit in there. No, if you actually line up, let's go with the tallest, which is probably the basketball player, women. You go line people up from the tallest to the smallest, like let's say a small wrestler or a small weightlifter or something. If you line up the men likewise, the males, tallest to smallest, so that for any given height or body shape, the man and the woman will compete with each other. For all things being equal, the men will win, the males win every single time. But if you line them up and you say, well, I'm going to pick the tallest woman
and the shortest man,
and I'm going to put her up against the shortest man. See, women can beat men. Well, of course. I mean, that's ridiculous. But for all things being equal, and in sport, it's the high end of both sexes that are in those categories. So for everybody of the same percentile within their sex category, so a man who's a 90th percentile and a woman who's a 90th percentile, he's gonna have like 10 to 40% advantage over her.
Yes.
So it's easy to mix it up and say, well, yeah, like some women can beat some men, but that's not the point. You have stratification in sport where you're competing within your same level of competition.
The most elite the
Yeah.
best in that sport. Thank you for answering that. I know it seems like a dumb question, but I've heard it
No, it's
often
not.
enough that
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
people just haven't. And if you're in that world, you don't hear
Yeah.
anyone easily debunking that. And
Yeah.
I think last time I talked about the sports issue on this channel, I just tried to explain what a bell curve was, because I was like, I think maybe people
Yeah.
just don't understand.
Stand it. Yeah.
Like you
No.
said,
I
what
mean,
is
but they don't even know what the bell curve is, half of them.
right?
So
Yeah.
you just say, line them up from tallest to
There you go.
smallest. They just line them up on equal terms, and the man will beat the woman every single time. Every single time.
Yeah.
It's not even the same. They're categorically different.
Can I ask you a question? We talked about this the last time I
Yeah.
covered this issue on Deprogrammed, and I was wondering, are there any sports in which that you know of where women do have a biological advantage? Is it true that they have a biological advantage only in long distance swimming? That's what I heard.
No.
Oh,
No. Women might, if you went ultra, where body fat would just, like, let's say you swam for 10 days straight, and women have a little more body fat. A woman might be able to last longer than a male or something, just because of the level of, body composition or something. But in a real situation in most sports, the only thing where females have a really distinct advantage is in their flexibility in their joints. Like, you have to have expandable joints to deliver a baby. Like, your hips can expand, and so basically, yeah, I mean, it's childbirth, and I mean, so I'd say rhythmic gymnastics. So, like, kind of like, like the contortionists in the circus.
okay.
You get some men that are really flexible, but overall, the women are by far more flexible. So in a sport like rhythmic gymnastics, it's not even surprising that at the Olympic level, it's only women in that sport. It's a completely female sport. So, I mean, and I had said this before in some other podcast, where my daughter was in rhythmic gymnastics when she was young. So I was sitting there watching. I had no idea about the scoring system, nothing, because I'm a track and field coach with a stopwatch and a tape measure, and you can measure all these things, and I could have no idea why the points were what they were in the rhythmic gymnastics scoring. But I was very fascinated as a human biologist and as a kinesiologist, watching the girls and just seeing. And honestly, these little tiny Asian girls, like, especially, like, they got a pretty short spine, and the one girl could, like, bend her back so that her back would touch her hips.
What?
Yeah. Like, she was so flexible. They're like, don't do that. That's dangerous. Like, in my mind, all the alarm bells are going off, because this girl can literally arch her back and touch her shoulders to her hips. And you get extra points for that, which I think is kind of probably shouldn't be allowed, because basically the way they're doing it. So the back, you can either, like, where are we here? Okay. So the back can curve nicely. So for a back bend, or you can just kip on, like, one vertebrae so that your shoulder touches your hip, right? So these girls were doing that. So it's like really compressing one of the vertebrae instead of just a nice sort of curve, right? So the ones that have a nice curve, they don't get all the way there. But the ones that can do that, and they collapse, they're collapsing on one vertebrae. And to me, you're just asking for, eventually in your life, you're going to have some sort of bulging disc or something. Like, yeah, I just, like, oh, I didn't like that. I told my daughter, the minute I see you doing this, I'm taking you out of the sport. Just keep your back bend curved, right? Like, just, yeah, I mean, it was just, that's a little thing, but I'm just saying, in that sport, it's all female all the time, and maybe men are starting to go in there, but literally, because of the flexibility, I would say that's the main sport where women have a huge advantage. And of course, balance sometimes too, because we have a lower center of gravity. So if you're top heavy, you can fall over, right? So men have big, wide shoulders and narrow hips. So they might be more likely to be toppling on a balance beam or something. But then you see a lot of guys can be high tightrope walking and stuff. I mean, they're good at that. That's fine. Little girls tend to have a little bit better balance, though, if you're just actually standing still and lift your leg off the ground. So between balance and flexibility, yeah, but all the other biomotor abilities, we call them biomotor abilities. So strength, speed, endurance, all these other things, agility, coordination, reaction time, all these other things, men have an advantage.
Hate facts.
I know,
That's
right?
what that is. It's a hate fact. Let
Yeah.
me let me ask you about the past couple of years. As you mentioned, a lot has been happening, and I saw what happened with British cycling. What's the
Yeah.
trend in your
Okay.
opinion? Where are things headed, and are there any major like losses or wins that we should know about?
Well, as you said, in the UK, we've had UK swimming, we've had cycling, we've had world athletics, world, track and field. Now they
Mhm.
had female and open. And the reason this is starting to happen, so the dominoes are starting to fall, which is really good news for women in sport and for sport in general, obviously. The reason why this is happening now, we're in a mess right now where some world federations of sport, like FIFA, the soccer, they still haven't come over to the actual recognizing female only. So there's some major sports yet to go. But the reason that this all is a mess in 2023 is because of something that happened in 2021. So let me explain what
Okay.
happened in 2021. So it was shortly after my last interview with you about the book. Of course, it was the Summer Olympics. So remember how it was delayed? It was supposed to be 2020, and then 2021 was the actual Tokyo Olympics because of COVID. They had it a year later.
Okay.
So Tokyo Olympics in 2021, we had Laurel Hubbard was the first
Right.
recognized trans person lifting the weight, and of course the world blew up. And of course, rightly, the world was scandalized seeing this person there, and so the person who's in charge of the IOC medical commission had an interview at the end of July that year saying, yeah, this policy allowing males to self-identify clearly isn't fit for purpose. We have to review the policy. And so that was great. Like all the women that I was sort of kind of quietly talking to behind the scenes and across the world were like, yay, maybe there's going to be an improvement. And so by August that year, so we're all expectantly waiting to hear, maybe some of us will get invited to the table. Yeah, right. So
You're like,
what happened instead, as you can predict, their first policy from 2015 wasn't fit for purpose because they had only consulted trans activists.
mm-hmm.
So guess what we started noticing on Twitter by early August after the Olympics was the trans activists bragging again that they got tickets and they were going to Lausanne, Switzerland to consult with the International Olympic Committee, and they were all bragging about it.
Okay.
So
they're
now, once again, the trans activists get the invitation to sit at the table to figure out what the new policy should be. And there's no woman in sight who really is representative going to the table to speak for our side.
Are
So
these
once again,
did these people even like the trans activists who were going? I'm curious, were there some of them who did not even have a sports or medicine
no, they
background?
were like the Veronica Ivy, Rachel McKinnon types,
Oh, okay.
like the Joanna Harper, like just this typical same old people, like just always the same people. It's never been too many. It's always these handful of male-born people who think they can speak for all of women's sports across the world.
Got it. By the way, here
Um,
is a picture just so you guys see if you're not familiar with Laurel Hubbard.
There's
That's
Laurel
yeah,
Hubbard.
at the
Yay. But
Olympics.
they kind of crashed out of the Olympics. Like I think almost it seems like some of us think it was maybe purposefully because the IOC didn't really want to have the embarrassment of a person standing on the medal podium. But anyway, that's a speculation. I can't prove that. Sure speculation on my part. Now, one of the people that was in one of the sports groups that started up in Australia, Save Women's Sports Australasia, Catherine Deves, who's well known. Kath Deves has run for office in Australia, has had a lot of hate from the trans activists. But anyway, Kath Deves is a lawyer, and Kath Deves wrote to the IOC on our behalf many ways. I just said, could somebody write a letter and ask, can we be at the table too? Can we be consulted, have the female voice represented at the table? And so Kath Deves wrote a letter, and within, I mean, sometimes the IOC never responds. So we were lucky, at least they responded. But like about 2 or 3 weeks later, Kath Deves gets a letter back saying a very cryptic, consultations are closed. We've already consulted with people like you.
Like you.
Basically. And so it's like, yeah, we know what women want. You don't have to be at the table kind of thing. Like, I don't know, whatever.
We know
That was
what
like,
girls
that was
want.
the, yeah, that was kind of like that was kind of like the idea. Anyway, I'm not, it's not a direct quote, but that was
Right.
the sense of it. And so we had already, like, what I realized was there were groups like Fair Play for Women in the UK. There's Save Women's Sports that Beth Stelzer started in the USA. There was Champion Women, Nancy Hogshead. There was just a number. Martina Navratilova group. there was COSBAR in Canada, which I'm part of. So there were countries. There was about 7 countries around the world that I knew had pro women's sports groups. So I basically had this idea, and you can probably understand it if I put it this way. Let's say in Switzerland, and when the IOC is having this consultation, they walk down the hallway and grab the secretary and bring her in and say, could you speak for the women? Like, not, who is that woman? Who appointed that woman to speak on our behalf? Even if they invited Linda Blade to the table, who do I represent? What do
Right.
The problem with the women's category is it's 51% of the entire global population, which is like, what, 5 billion people? Who represents the female voice really when we're such a big category?
Right.
It's easy to find somebody to represent the trans voice because there's probably relatively few. So who does represent the female athlete voice or the female voice in sport? And so that question occurred to me, like, there has to be something bigger that we need to be able to say we are the voice. So I actually contacted what all the groups I was aware of at that time who are advocating for women's sports, and we got them on an email, and we just said, first of all, the IOC said they had consulted us, some people. So I said, were you consulted? And the second question is, if the IOC contacted you and you were consulted, what did you say on our behalf? Because we should also know what you're saying on our behalf. And all the groups said, nope, didn't talk to us.
Wow.
So at that moment, we realized we have to form an umbrella group, an international umbrella group of all the women's groups from around the world so that we can collectively have a position and say we are the voice of women's sports.
And
globally.
all together and know, who's
it's like under an umbrella. They can be their individual country groups, but an umbrella group called the International Consortium on Female Sport.
I
ICFS.
love this. Okay.
So we started working on it. It wasn't official. We just started having conversations and meetings. And lo and behold, by November of 2021, the IOC came out with it was kind of a confusing thing because they first of all said it's up to each individual sports organization globally to have their own policy. So that was okay. They said every organization should just develop their own fairness policy. But they then had this weird ideological statement how we continue to be, as the International Olympic Committee, in favor of full inclusivity, and if a male is in a female race, it's up to the women to prove that he has a competitive advantage. So, like, how do you do that?
All available evidence, like you said, points to the fact that men have.
So imagine this: you show up for a race day because you don't know, they all have female names. So you run a race and realize the person who's beating you in front of you is a male.
Mm-hmm.
So you finish your race, and what are you supposed to do? Dig into your briefcase and prove a case in that moment that the guy has a competitive, like
yeah.
You're asking something so ridiculous of female athletes.
It's impractical. Yeah.
But anyway, but at least it said that the individual federations could do their own thing, because it kind of makes sense, because you and I both know, like, in equestrian, you have male riders, female riders, it's all one. Like, it's the horse doing the jumping. It's show jumping or whatever. It's not, the rider, it can be a male or female. It probably does make a difference in terms of the strength of the male for his body weight. But, equestrian, okay, so that rule might be different. And, archery might be different, or
that makes
shooting.
Sense. Right.
So it does kind of make sense that each individual sport should kind of have their own rule based on what the people inside that sport agree on and what is fair. So that was kind of an improvement. So which is why this is all still happening now. Every sport now has to do their own thing. But for us, that made it even clearer that we need an international consortium group, because instead of having one table of negotiation, which is at the Olympic Committee, we would have to talk to 200 different sports one at a time to have the right policy.
Yeah.
So we would have to advocate in various ways. And of course we'd have to, anyway, so just keep that in the back of your mind. And then fast forward that within 2 weeks of the IOC announcing their new policy position, that's when Leah Thomas was that was the first time Leah Thomas showed up on the news.
Wow. Okay.
So that was really interesting, and of course very awful. But I mean, that whole thing. So from as you know, it was about half a year where it was just outrage, because Leah Thomas was beating people by 2 or 3 lengths in some of the races, and obviously still male, obviously still had not mitigated anything, not done any surgery, not done any harm. So basically still with all the male advantages, being ranked, almost 500 in the NCAA for men, suddenly is winning all these women's races. And it was very clear it wasn't fair.
I'm showing this image here of Leah Thomas, because I think images like this have done a lot to help wake people up, because visually it's just so arresting to see.
It's just crazy.
You can't deny the difference. So
by March of 2022, so 6 months later, March 2022, Leah was at the NCAA final, and actually I went to to Atlanta to see the race. So I saw with my own 2 eyes this abomination, and just couldn't believe it. And of course,
were you there with Posey Parker?
Yeah, I was sitting next to Posey Parker.
Okay,
when Posey Parker had that one where Leah Thomas is walking towards her. Oh no, when she had that conversation about, I'm not a vet, but I know what a dog is. I was literally sitting with her on the left of her.
I saw that video.
So anyway, but that was it was fun to be there with her. But anyway, so really, I kind of was there to witness it, and it was just unbelievable. And how the parents were. We were out front even protesting, and parents would give us the shy thumbs up, but people were so afraid, and it was so obvious. Like, most people did agree with us, but they were intimidated. They didn't want their daughters to be blacklisted, blah, blah, blah. Mothers were crying in the hallway. It was just unbelievable being there. Wow. And so meanwhile, through all that time, our group was still meeting about once a month, just trying to get this consortium together. And lo and behold, like the Leah Thomas, of course, that NCAA final spawned Riley Gaines. It spawned the Icons Women, because the Icons Women group is a new group of a mother that had her daughter had to swim against Leah Thomas on the Penn team. And so all of a sudden, all these women, who are really highly, trained professionals that had been in the NCAA for themselves, whose daughters had to deal with this unfairness, they started getting together and they formed this new group, Icons Women. And so they started getting, together with us too, under the ICFS umbrella.
That's great.
And so finally, by January 2023, this year, that's why by January 9th, we announced our entity as an International Consortium for Female Sport, with all these subgroups under us for different countries. And that's in that capacity, I went as a representative of ICFS. We went to Austin. That was like the first time we showed up in Austin as an organization. And then Riley Gaines was serving. She would lead a march to where she served the NCAA officials with the warning about legal action. So it was really it was a sidewalk protest of all these different women's groups, and then including us, and then Riley was there, and it's just like so much. You can tell like the explosive impact of that, like those women suddenly stepping up, right?
I love this because I remember, and I still see it today, but especially when Leah Thomas won, that picture that I
Mhm.
showed, that really iconic picture.
Yeah.
There was so much talk. I saw so many people saying, "Where are the women? This won't end until the women stand
Yeah.
up." And the women, and
Have.
what I'm hearing is that women have stood up. And I did see, I'd never heard
Yeah.
of Riley Gaines before. And,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, I'm going to put up your website here, and then I have a super chat, some questions for you, I think.
Sure.
Here,
So
guys, you guys,
International Consortium.
this is
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Yep.
ICFsport.org.
Yeah.
You guys want to visit them?
Yeah.
This is
And you
so
can
encouraging.
even sign up just as a, just as an affiliate. Like, you don't have to be like a main member, just add your name in there as affiliate who supports this endeavor. And we have, if you go to the media, if you click on media,
Okay.
yeah, you'll see that have been actively writing letters to the different organizations on their fairness and unfairness policies.
This is great. Wow. Okay. Everybody go check out this website, icfsport.org,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you want to get involved. Okay. I've
Yeah.
got a couple things in the chat. I'll just take a quick break and
Okay,
read
sure.
this. Keith
Sure.
J. Hello, Keith. Thanks for the $10 super chat. He says, "Hi, Keri and Coach Blade. In my 20 years coaching high school track, I had average and gifted female sprinters. The idea that one of my hardworking girls would lose to a guy would have set my hair on fire."
Amen, bro. Amen. It set my hair on fire. Why do you think I've been an activist for 5 years now? All it took is that one moment I saw what was going to happen to women's sport, like to female athletes. I just couldn't believe it. I could not believe it.
And then let me see. And there's the link. Thank you, Cheeky Mare, for posting that.
Perfect.
And if I missed any questions, Cheeky, because I wasn't really watching the chat, if I missed any questions, can you just collect them all and put them in one comment for me? That would be great if you can do that. Somebody asked if that was Riley Gaines in that photo with Leah Thomas. No,
that wasn't the one. No,
no,
that was a different race.
And then let's see. This is unrelated. This was from the beginning, but I just want to thank you, Beard, for the super chat. $5. He says, "Pride needs to pass away. Humility needs to be valued. Mockery needs to be allowed, and logic needs to be used as a tuning fork for culture." I think I agree with all that. Mockery has a place sometimes.
It does. It does. It literally, like, we're not allowed to, there in Canada especially, like, it's so locked down, like, in terms of, you are compelled by law to say certain things, blah, blah, blah. And I found a nice, very respectful ways to get around it. But one of the useful ways to getting around it is just say what they're saying and be mocking it. Like, it's so ridiculous. And mockery really does work because it just shows them up for who they are. I mean, literally, it's just amazing to me that they can keep holding these positions, and they're just absolutely, if you look at the reality of sport, it's just so ridiculous. Now, about a week after we were in Austin, I had my first Canadian athlete finally step up, who's on Team Canada, finally an active athlete who was able to say something. Her name is April Hutchinson. If you Google April Hutchinson, she's just been all over now. She even got to be on Tucker before Tucker left. I mean, she has been speaking out because she is a power lifter, Canadian Powerlifting Union.
Okay.
And so one of our letters was to the Canadian Powerlifting Union. I think it was probably even our first letter as an organization, was to warn the Canadian Powerlifting Union that they're being unfair by allowing a male athlete to compete with the women.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we said, we're watching you. We're going to make sure that you're not, that you are reviewing your policy, and we will be watching to make sure you're being fair to your female athletes. And they didn't really respond much, but we found out that they were going to be having their national championships in Vancouver the month later in February. So on February 16th, we showed up as ICFS. It was our first sort of inaction protest, or sort of action, I guess. We decided, like, instead of being outside on the sidewalk protesting anything, we created like these little logos, the ICFS logo, put it on the back of our shirts. We had like those pennies that you wear in soccer. We just put the logo on the back. We had XY does not equal XX on the front. And there were 19 women that showed up. We just bought our admissions. We just sat there and we cheered for the women. And, our idea was that we were going to be polite. We're going to cheer for the female athletes, not try to disrupt the female competition. But when the male would get the medal, we'd just stand up and turn our backs and they'd see our logo.
Yeah.
So it was just an sort of competition. And powerlifting is cool because it's in a very restricted space. Like it's usually happening in a hotel. In this case, it was Sheraton. I have to be careful which company I say. But anyway, it was in a hotel convention center and you're just in a room and the platform's there and you watch the people lift. And so we went in there as women to just support the female athletes. And if you go on Twitter, there's Icons Women, and they posted from February 16th how suddenly we were all sitting there, and it's on Twitter. I think it's Icons Women. If you go to their media or February 16th, you'll see that the men came and tried to kick us out. They were threatening to call the police.
Because you were standing there quietly with your shirt
on? Because we were there in the back, like we had a row as spectators cheering for the men. Or for the women, not the women. Again, so for the women to keep the men out of women's sports. And so these guys showed up, some of like the meet director, and tried to get us kicked out. And you'll see that there's a post like that Icons Women posted for us because we were there. We kind of sent a video to Icons Women's group that we were there and how we were trying to get kicked out. They were trying to kick us out of the venue. I don't know if you can find it, but I should have had it sent in advance.
No, that's fine. It's a video from February?
Yeah, it should be February 16.
I'll find it while we're talking because I definitely want to see this. And I just looked up April Hutchinson. And
she's
wow,
badass.
She looks so strong.
Yeah, she's strong.
I would hate for her to be robbed of an award and all of her work. Like that woman deserves her medal. Yeah. I'm going to find this though.
Go ahead. Keep looking for it. In fact, I can probably find it too here. I could send you the link maybe.
Kelly Lamb,
because it was epic.
Kelly Lamb in the chat from Canada. I don't know if you guys know each other. She's great.
Yes, Kelly.
Canadian. Hey, Kelly.
Hi, from Saskatchewan, I believe.
She says, and thank you for the super chat, Kelly. She says, thank you, Linda, for representing Canada in a brave, common sense light versus the usual embarrassing, nonsensical stories we hear from this place lately.
Yeah, it's so great. Thank you,
Dion says, I'm happy to see people standing up.
Hey, Dion.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So let me just find, because I think, let's see. Let me just see the thing. Icons Women.
I love the fact that you guys are actually showing up. It's not just, online and writing letters, which are powerful also, but actually going to these competitions and physically like taking up space. As you talked about how those mothers at that swim meet, there were people there who were upset but afraid. And I think the more they see in person that people are there saying, hey, we don't agree with this, it makes it feel more comfortable for people to say what they really think and come out against it.
Exactly. Yeah. So what it was is that so here it is. It was on February 16th. How do I get this?
You can send it to me on Twitter or in the private chat here.
Yeah, let's do this. Here, I'm gonna grab it and copy, and then I'm gonna put it into your Twitter thing.
I'll grab it there.
There, I just sent it right there. I believe it is.
Cool, I got it.
So you can see us cheering, and then the guy comes up and tries to kick us out.
Okay, let's watch this.
Okay, so put up the audio. Put up the audio.
Okay.
It's in Vancouver, in Richmond, BC, actually, at the powerlifting championship.
Ma'am, I'm going to need you to leave because
it's okay.
You're here. No, I'm just imagining what he's saying because you're here cheering. No.
Turn up the audio when you get it.
Like, what would he have to say? I'm going to need you guys to go because you're here cheering.
Okay, listen, turn it up.
Okay, we got it.
You can see our logo on the back.
Nope. Okay.
Listen, I have a RCMP officer who said if there's trouble, I should call her. So I'll call her.
What are you calling the police for? We're respectfully here, cheering for women.
This is a private event. You guys
paid to get in here.
That's correct. And that admission is revoked. This is supposed to be a safe
We are
space.
cheering for women. It is safe. How are we making it unsafe? Can you tell me how you make it?
So then he goes and gets the hotel. The next one after that, he goes and gets the hotel manager to try to kick us out because it's the if you just scroll to the next, I think it's the next one down. I think it is, and you'll see the hotel manager come and try to get us out too, and it was just so ridiculous. It was just unbelievable.
Oh yes, I see it. Hold on, let me pull this one up. Unbelievable. He said if you had trouble hearing, he said he was going to have to call the police.
Yeah,
that this was supposed to be a safe space, whatever that means. Yeah. And she's like, it is safe. We're here cheering for women.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, here's the next video.
So if you're refusing to leave, then I just want you to know that we're going to have to take it to another step. But I'm formally letting you know.
Samuel St. Pierre, 644 pounds. Deprogrammed St. Pierre.
We're here cheering for women.
After him comes Dick.
I'm just letting you know. If you're not willing to come, I will have to go to the next level.
I'm going to have to go to the next level, you think.
So you're refusing to leave. Correct?
We are here cheering for women. We paid to get in just like everybody else.
Okay. So you're refusing.
Why should we have to leave? Tell me what the reason is we need to leave. What's the reason?
She said the police are out in the hallway.
What? We paid to get in. We didn't sneak in, and we're cheering. If you don't have a reason, what would the RCMP be here for?
You're on my property. I can ask.
Okay, I paid to get in. So what's the reason?
413.4.
That's not a reason. These people have signs. Those people have signs. These people are cheering. So are we.
7 for Jacob.
Wow. They sent a whole team over, Linda.
Yeah, they did. They tried to get.
What happened after that? Did the police come?
No, well then they realized it's just like we'd paid our admission. There was nothing we were doing wrong. So basically, the meet manager finally had met with me behind the curtain and just said, "Look, the thing we don't like is you're showing your Posey Parker signs. Like we had adult, human, female, and the flag. There was somebody who had a flag, and they said, well, you can sit there and cheer and do what you want, have your vests on or whatever, but just don't show the flags. That's just annoying to people. So basically, we just said, okay, well, I guess no flags or whatever. But we sat there and we cheered and we had a great day together. All the ladies. We went out for lunch afterwards. Had a lovely time. And I mean, we just had made our point because we had told the Canadian Powerlifting Union, CPU. We are going to be watching to make sure you're being fair. And sure enough, a male-born person did get third, didn't win, but got third and robbed somebody of their bronze medal.
How terrible does he have to be not to just completely dominate? I think Zuby broke a lady's record.
Yeah, yeah, Zuby.
How mediocre does that man have to be?
Well, then later, about in March, I believe, or April, then there was a male person, like a coach from Alberta who had been a coach on team powerlifting, national team coach. He actually entered a competition here in my province of Alberta just to prove the point. Like he just went in there and lifted a bigger and beat the record of the other male person. So just to prove the point.
Yeah. And
so Canadian powerlifting is in a bit of an uproar, but guess what they did? Their response, instead of saying, yeah, this is ridiculous, let's meet and talk about this. Their response was to put April on a disciplinary, they launched disciplinary action against April in March.
Why?
because apparently she's responsible for all us 19 women being there, for the ICFS women being there or something. Like, it's just, so she went through this entirely stressful disciplinary review, and they informed her on April 2 that really was nothing wrong with, like, they absolved her basically, which was good. And basically she was supposed to refrain from wearing her Team Canada top when she's on these interviews saying stuff about the powerlifting. Well, I get it. I mean, she doesn't represent the CPU in that sense. Like, she doesn't speak on behalf of the association. She speaks on behalf of herself. But now, and she thought she was in the clear, and she's been named to Team Canada for, the summer competitions. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, last week, she gets another letter from them saying, oh, somebody complained about our results and wants us to investigate you again, pretty much. So she's under investigation again by the CPU.
Sort of, just
like, it's just harassment of an athlete.
Yeah.
It's harassment of an athlete.
Yeah.
And they're going to keep harassing her all the way through. You just know it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, that's been happening. So what we have is we have epic athletes like Riley Gaines and April Hutchinson showing up. So since the book, we've had this trend of more and more female athletes stepping up, and which is great. And for me, the newest, more sort of promising trend is now to see fathers of the little girls who are being unfairly treated at the grassroots level. Fathers are starting to step up. So I have a couple of stories here, because since I've sort of been out there speaking on behalf of female sport now for about half a decade, I just can't believe how much time has gone on this madness. Mm-hmm. But I have had just to give you an example, just this month, a letter from a dad in British Columbia. I'll just read it for you.
Yes,
he
please.
Says, hello, I am sadly writing to seek some help. My daughter loves soccer, and at the young age of 9, she just had to play a match against a boy in a girls' team. And later, I found that my daughter's own club has issued a policy saying that anyone can be a girl and therefore play in the girls' team. This boy they played against was bigger, faster, stronger than most of our girls. And though it wasn't the only factor, our girls lost 7-1 and were visibly intimidated when playing against this boy. Please help. So I've been engaging with father like that. So this 9-year-old girl, he wants to do more. And we're just trying to figure out how to do it so that the father doesn't lose his job. And it's just, we have to find ways in Canada to make progress on policy without tipping the balance and causing too much of a problem for the family. So we're working on that behind the scenes. Right. But that's, again, ICFS in action, because they're it's the whole consortium. We can speak to at ground level, we can go to the international level and the female voice. And then there's a father just 2 weeks ago here in my province of Alberta, 11 grade 11 girl, mm-hmm. She lost her spot, her chance to go to the state final, provincial final in track and field, because a boy had beat her out by a male-born student had beat her out by a foot length in the race. And so he started a petition, and the father started a petition, change.org, to petition for the school association to let the daughter compete and so that petition got signed by 5,000 people within one day. Wow. He got so much support. And so I think the school association was smart to just say, okay, we're going to give your daughter an exemption, let her compete. I went to the race, which was here on Saturday in my city on the weekend, and I watched, and there was no male student in that race. So I don't know whatever happened, but she was able to be there, and I was able to have a chat with the dad. And but here's I just want to give the comment that he had said in his petition. He said, why should his comment, or he quoted his daughter Hannah saying, why would I even compete anymore? I can't beat a boy. I want to quit. So this is what, we drive girls out of sport. This is what happens, right? And interestingly, at the track meet on Saturday, so that was just 2 days ago. So I go to find the dad because I see her running, and then, okay, I know which one she is now. So I kind of went over and saw her with her dad. So I just wanted to go and talk to the dad. So I show up to the stand, and the dad, this woman is talking to the dad. She's got her back to me, and I'm thinking, well, I'll just wait my turn. Like, she's obviously, they're having conversation. But as I could hear things, she was yelling at him and things like, "You're a bigot, So obviously it was a trans activist attacking the dad at the track meet. And so I was able to basically, I just kind of brought myself into next to him, and I said, do you mind if I asked her, do you mind if I interject something here? I said, I noticed you're talking about the petition and about this whole situation. So she goes, well, sure, go ahead. And so I turned to the dad right in front of the trans activists. I'm saying, David, thank you so much for what you did. That petition was the best thing you could have done. Thank you for being a dad, supporting your daughter, and for supporting girls in sport. Well, the trans activists just lost it. Like, it just went all the epithets you've ever heard in your life. Basically, you guys are so hateful to these children, and you're a bigot, and just no end of, harassment or just insulting the man. And basically, I just, was trying to calmly get her to just calm down. I just said, well, don't you think you're being a bigot against the women and the girls? Like, the girls need fairness too, right? And I'm not a bigot. Like, a lot of these activists, they can never see themselves as being the bigots, but they are. Yeah. And so when you say that, like,
they're so shocked, and it's like the people who engage in this kind of stuff, I feel like they're so disconnected from themselves and reality. And they're often, it's that projection thing where you've got someone she's literally standing there screaming at him hatefully and accusing him of being hateful. And it's like, you don't even, you're not even aware of what you're doing. Yeah. I'm so glad you went up and talked to him.
She brought up something really interesting. They think, so the trans activists in Canada, they think that we're violating the charter, like the Human Rights Code and the charter. And so what we have in this country is two different sets of rulings about human rights. So the first one was in the early 80s. The Bill of Rights in the States was brought in by James Madison like 200 years ago. We only had ours brought in 1983. So we have people with living memory who were there when our Bill of Rights came to Canada, like, because since we were a colony of the Britain for a long time, and then we finally brought our own Bill of Rights home. So that was in like 1983. So we have people who were there on the ground, like one man left who was there and understands the context of, in that Bill of Rights and human rights, biological sex was one of the features that you're not allowed to discriminate against. So basically, sex, and there's, religion and ethnicity, there's so many different things listed that you can't discriminate on the basis of those things. So we have in our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is this Bill of Rights, we have it stated that you're not supposed to discriminate on the basis of sex. Yeah. No discrimination based on sex. So that sits there. And then when Justin Trudeau came in 2015 and 16 and 17, brought in this Bill C-16, which also says you cannot discriminate on the basis of gender identity and gender expression, which, kind of makes sense. Nobody should be bullied on the basis of those things. Mm-hmm. So everybody thinks now that the gender identity expression of Bill C-16 overrides our fundamental charter rights about discrimination based on sex, but they both just sit there in conflict. So I'm telling this woman, she goes, obviously you haven't read the charter. So when we were discussing this thing at the track meet, she goes, I said, yes, I very much have. And I said, the charter says it's unlawful to discriminate against anybody on the basis of sex. So if you put a male body in a female sport, you're actually discriminating on girls on the basis of sex. Mm-hmm. So that's illegal. You shouldn't be doing that. Oh, but we have gender expression. I said, yeah, I mean, you have these other things, but it doesn't mean that just because we have this new rule about gender expression and gender identity, that it somehow, that's biological sex went away from the charter. Right. So I told her, like, do you realize that your position means that now we have male rapists who self-identify into women's prisons now in this country because people are misappropriating the new bill.
Yes.
So they're
Misusing.
thinking gender identity and expression somehow trumps biological sex. And so when a prison warden has a male rapist, and then the guy obviously sees an advantage of saying, well, now I identify as a woman, and they're putting them in the female prisons, and they're
Yes.
raping women in the prisons.
Yes.
I said, you realize that your position means that women in prisons are getting raped by male-born people who are identifying as women. That doesn't happen, she said. That doesn't happen. I said, oh yeah, I have evidence I can show you.
There's just
So,
open a newspaper. Yes, it happens. They
Yeah.
tend to do this, I think, with things they can't defend. It's not just this issue, but several I've seen, Linda. They always start from a place of that's not happening.
Yep.
And then when you show them evidence that it is happening, then of course the argument changes. But it starts off
Right.
with absolute denial.
Yeah.
It's weird.
So what I'm getting to is, and the funny thing is, in this province, we have sex in our human rights code as well. But the funniest thing and ironic thing, it's not funny, it's serious. The ironic thing is in the early 90s, long before the gender identity and everything came up, the conservatives, like this is a highly conservative, we're considered to be the Texas of Canada. We're highly conservative and we have the oil and the cattle. We're here, like this is Alberta.
You got the cowboy boots there?
Oh yeah.
Oh, good.
They have,
Okay.
oh yeah, Calgary Stampede, all the stampedes in the summer. So we basically have the oil and the cattle, and we're pretty conservative. But in the 90s, for some reason, early 90s, because people were trying to be polite, they changed the word sex to gender in that code, still meaning sex, but gender was just a softer word for saying biological, the noun. So gender meaning the noun of sex, not the verb of sex.
Right.
Right?
It used to be interchangeable.
Yeah. And so all they had to do then, these woke people come along 15 years later and redefine gender, the word that's already there. So I think what needs to happen in this province, at least, and probably across Canada, is that we need to put the word sex back into the human rights codes of the provinces.
Yes. Because
it's getting too confusing.
They've actually, I think this is part of the reason they target language so much. It's not just that, well, number one, if they can change words and the definition of words, they can more easily control the way we think. I'm talking about activists or ideologues. But number two, because they can change the law without needing to change the law. If they can change the dictionary, they can change the law.
That's what their whole playbook is. Change the definition of something and you've won. Yeah. And we're just saying, no, I don't accept it. This is not my definition. I won't change that. And that's then gets to the Matt Walsh's what is a woman, because I think he got that idea. He never admits it, but I think he got that idea from Kelly J. Keane saying, the definition of woman, adult, human, female. She had that for quite a few years. And then that just raises the question of what is a woman? And then it goes into these things, which is, everybody in this movement, whatever job they can do. So what Matt Walsh did, fantastic. Like, we're happy. The only thing about that is that there's a lot of the conservative guys who've never heard of our movement. They're acting like Matt's the only one fighting for women and the rest of us aren't. And I just think that's a little bit weird. Like people like me, like Megan Murphy, like you could just go down the list. I mean, people have been fighting. Women have been alone, like lone voices in the wilderness for years doing this. And then, the conservative groups come along and say, well, we're all the feminists, we're all the women. Well, first of all, I'm not sure I'm a feminist one way or another. I mean, you can call me a feminist, whatever. I'm not even sure what that means. But I mean, the fact is there have been a lot of us working really hard behind the scenes, but women who don't have the platform that, maybe somebody at the Daily Wire might have. But we've been, we have evidence. Like, look at all the interviews I've been doing for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. I mean, we have evidence that a lot of us have been really working hard on this, and we welcome more people to the struggle. And I'm completely, obviously grateful to Matt or whoever does these things. Like, it just helps, right?
It feels like it became more of a cultural flashpoint where people are paying attention to it in the past couple of years, where for a while it was sort of just this schism that was happening in the so-called women's movement or feminist movement, where you had this war breaking out, and I saw people like Megan being targeted and called a TERF and called all these names, and there was this division, where it's like, oh, you've got the radical feminists over here and they're trans exclusive and they're transphobes, and you've got the third wave feminists here, the I think of as the woke feminists, and then with all these athletes. I'm so glad you laid out the timeline of Laurel Hubbard and Leah Thomas, because I think what happened is that normies and conservatives started seeing those pictures and the images. You can't look at a picture of Laurel Hubbard or Leah Thomas next to their female competitors and still walk away saying, yeah, this seems fair. Cool. It's cool.
And you know what? And so you asked about like the cycling situation, which is just outrageous. So I'm going to kind of end on that. I think I need to get going soon, but I did want to address what you had said about the cycling, because international cycling is definitely just out of control. I mean, so many males in female cycling around the world.
Them. I've got a picture up here of Molly Cameron, because
Molly.
Again, I think he is it's so arresting to see his images and say, wait a minute, that dude's like competing with women. Okay.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Come on. Yeah. So basically, the ICFS, if you went back to the media site, you don't have to, but I printed out the letter that we did to the open letter to the international cycling, encouraging them to be, have a policy that is more fair to women. And just further inside the letter that we sent, I just want to read, because we quoted, there was a female, Hannah Arensman, who decided to quit because she just had it up to here with having to compete against males all the time. And so basically,
is this your letter from May 4th?
Yeah, this was the May, if you go through, May 4 letter.
Okay.
So I'll just go on page 2 of the letter. It says, so let's go down right when you talk about elite women, go down and you'll see this. Quoting after it says women's sports law, that I have decided to end my cycling career. At my last race at the recent UCI Cyclocross National Championships in the elite women's category in December 2022, I came in 4th place, flanked on either side by male riders, awarded 3rd and 5th places. My sister and family sobbed as they watched a man finish in front of me, having witnessed several physical interactions with him throughout the race. And you can see that Austin Killups guy, he was actually shoulder checking her around the corners of this race. And then further to that, additionally, it is difficult for me to think about the very real possibility I was overlooked for an international selection on the Team USA at Cyclocross Worlds in February 2023 because of a male competitor. Moving forward, I feel for young girls learning to compete and who are growing up in a day when they no longer have a fair chance at being new record 20 holders and champions in cycling because men want to compete in our division. I have felt deeply angered, disappointed, overlooked, and humiliated that the rule makers of women's sports do not feel it is necessary to protect women's sports to ensure a fair competition for women anymore.
Wow.
So it's a powerful statement, seriously.
Yes. Absolutely.
And here's the thing you don't know about that cyclocross race where she was shoulder checked. Not many people mention it, but there was a rumor that there was going to be women protesting at this event, protesting Austin Killups being there. And so the coach of Austin Killups, who was also the meet director, I think, or one of the officials anyway, called his buddies around that area of the USA, and an entire gun club of men with guns showed up to that race in case there were women protesting.
What? I've got to look this up.
So I'm not sure if it was even a story about it, but it was on Twitter that there was somebody mentioning the men showed up from the gun club.
just to be intimidating, I guess.
Yeah, just, I mean, not that they
Yeah.
were going to even bring their guns, but when you say the men from the gun club are coming, like,
Yeah.
so it's not even just for the female athletes, but if a woman had showed up that day, they would have been intimidated by a bunch of men from the gun club.
Yeah. Who are there on behalf of men competing
Yeah.
with the women.
Yeah.
It just
Like,
blows my
it's
mind.
crazy stuff. So here's the thing. Let's just finish on this note.
Yeah.
As a coach, and I'm still coaching to this day, even if I've moved on from being president, as the coach on the ground every day, I'm still seeking fairness. I work within this international organization. I'm very happy for whether it's Matt Walsh or Martina Navratilova or, anybody, Megan Murphy, whoever's going to fight this fight, I'm totally on their side. But the simple solution is every sport governing body needs to have sane policy, because it just takes away all of this nonsense. Like, if the policy had been clear, even for the Alberta schools, this father would not have to endure some trans activist yelling at him. Like, and in the case of UCI cycling, a woman would still be cycling because there wouldn't have been this matter to deal with.
Yes.
So it just takes all the controversy away. If you have a clear policy and you stick to that policy, that's the answer for all of sport.
Can I ask you, do you know of any organization that's for the parents who want to protect girls' sports?
Well, I think that they're starting to come together, like these fathers and parents who are writing us now. I think that they are, I think that it's coalescing, let's put it that way. So when we start, I don't have a strict answer. They can contact us through ICFS. But what I'm seeing, and this is kind of what I wanted to get across, between the last interview that you had me on and now, so 2 years, over the 2 years, we've had had the Leah Thomas thing, we've had ICFS creation, we've had now the Riley Gaineses and April Hutchinson's standing up, speaking out. We've had the parents now starting to write letters. And let's face it, congrats to the USA. A lot of states have passed laws at the state level. So we also have to acknowledge that. So I believe it's trending really well. It's just, can you look at how enormous the effort has had to be? Like, how much effort have we had to make at every stage, every venue, every possible way to get these simple things reversed?
Yes.
It's exhausting.
How much work for what, again, used to be common sense.
What is really obvious, like a simple, obvious solution, and we'd all be inclusive, 100% inclusive, and nobody would have these problems. But it's because somebody was able to get in there and usurp the language, as you said.
Just change the language, and they're really good at weaponizing that
bullying.
If you don't agree with us, you're a meanie and a bigot, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Here's the website Linda's mentioning again, ICFS sport.org, and I wanted to put up on screen, if you want to follow Linda on Twitter, she's at Coach Blade.
Coach Blade.
I want to find her online. And then I think I had Cheeky Mare. Let me know if there were any questions that I missed that did not get highlighted. If they were not a super chat, they don't get highlighted. So just let me know. Thank you, Stephen Landau, for the $20 super chat, for the support. Thank you for the support for the channel. He says, thank you, Linda. There's an abundance of cowardice in this fight. I know it's tough, especially for young women. But do any women athletes talk about boycotting these competitions?
Yeah, this was a big thing because a lot of people say, well, if girls would just sit down at the starting line. And this has happened. Actually, there was a cycling race in the UK about a year ago, or maybe it was even just this year, where Emily Bridges, there's a male athlete called Emily Bridges trying to compete as a woman. And all the women just said in advance, we're not competing. If that person shows up, we're not competing. And it worked. So when all the women know each other in that community, boycotting works really well. But when you're like coming into a competition where you don't have a clue who your competitors are, you're not friends, you have no clue who they are, you just have a bunch of names on a piece of paper, you don't know if you sit down on the line whether any of the other girls in that race are going to sit down.
Are going to sit down too, yeah.
So you're just there and you just think, well, why would I've trained for a year to be here and I'm going to sit down on the line and everybody else is going to be running? Like, how does that work?
Yeah.
Who coordinates that? So it's really hard to actually coordinate a full boycott, but I think we are slowly getting to that point. If it's a race, either the policy gets fixed or the boycotts are coming.
Yeah.
And so we're in that messy middle where we're advocating for the policies to get fixed or boycotts, or I would say lawsuits. So some of the people are suing, which is great. Like Chelsea Mitchell now back in the States but way back from the Connecticut boys running in the high schools, like she's now launched a suit. So I think there's still lawsuits coming. And the truth of the matter is, that's one of the things that made me an activist, because early on when I told you that in 2018, I'd first become aware of this policy that they're going to push in Canada, I literally had a dinner with one of the top people in the sport and took him to dinner. And I said, look, this isn't fair. So tell me privately, you and me, one-on-one, what's really going on here? And he kind of hummed and hawed. And I just, I think what you're afraid of is lawsuits, right? Like you're afraid that trans-identified people are going to start suing us. That's why you're pushing this policy,
right?
And I said, but don't you understand that there's many, many, many more women and girls, and aren't you afraid of them?
They're going to sue your butt.
Yeah, aren't you afraid of legal action from the women's side, which is far more likely because there's so many more of them, and the men will be clearly dominating the sport. And he said, and this is the quote, he said, girls wouldn't do that.
Wow. Oh, but in that quote, he's admitting there's a difference.
Yes. Yes. So basically, in that quote, that was the moment where I thought, you just turned me into an activist, because girls will do this. We will fight.
I love it.
And, it's that moment. He probably doesn't realize that one statement, and he probably even thought he said it in jest with a little twinkle in his eye. But no matter what, that is an attitude that I knew a lot of people had, that we wouldn't dare. I dare.
You dare. Linda, if you do your next book, I think it should be called Girls Wouldn't Do That.
Yes. Girls wouldn't do that.
Night Train says Coach Blade is like Tom Petty. She won't back down and she'll stand her ground.
Yeah. Yay. That's true. I have to say, just in passing and closing, that now that I'm not president of track and field in Alberta, Athletics Alberta, I'm free to do bigger things. And I think my next realm is to try to engage with the national political parties to get a better things in their policy positions to protect and be pro women and pro girls. And I know the one party, People's Party, but that they don't have any MPs yet. So they've made statements that are very much, sex-based rights and all that. And they will probably eventually have MPs and stuff. I don't doubt it. But in the meantime, we have 4 other main parties in Canada, and none of them have very clear policy positions on fairness and safety for female persons. Mm-hmm. So I think kind of that has to be the next level, really.
Yes. I love it. You're so inspiring. I love all that you've managed to accomplish and help do in the past couple years. And I want to thank you for your time and your insight coming to talk with us today on Deprogrammed. And again, you guys, if you want to follow Coach Blade on Twitter, she's at Coach Blade.
Thank you.
And then, any final?
Yeah, keep in touch.
Words?
Keep in touch. I mean, seriously, like, we're just in the middle of this battle, like this war. I mean, it's a war on women, and just, we welcome anybody who can do things that, promote sex-based rights and just clarity. We know that it's just we're gonna eventually get to the truth. But we just have to it has to be consistent and persistent, I guess.
Yes. And there's a role for everyone. Like
Yeah,
someone
there
said
is.
at the beginning about mockery, even the memers do some of the best work. So maybe
Absolutely. We love
maybe
it.
you're out there making humor about this and poking fun.
Yeah.
That's so valuable because it changes the way
Yeah.
people think about things. So
Yeah. Well, we're working hard in the, there's so much happening underneath, behind the scenes. There are the guys that can be big and splashy and out there. But there are so many of us, they're just like the aquifer under the ground. We're working hard, and be sure that this isn't going away anytime soon. We're going to get there.
Next time you're in Texas, let me know. I want to come get kicked out of a sporting event with you.
Done, my friend.
Cool. Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Blade. Thanks for being here with us. Thank you to everyone who spent time
Thanks
in
for
the
having
chat.
me.
And if you're watching this later, make sure you go and check out Coach Blade on Twitter. Take care, guys.
Perfect. Thank you
Bye.
very much. Bye.